I don't know what I pushed, but at least we're going.
Be careful, the IT director is online.
What would cause that?
He's trying to connect your Wi-Fi.
Oh,
I think, Brad,
it's-
maybe.
Yeah, yeah, more than likely the case.
all right. So I assume he has connected. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Village of Tequesta and a Village Council workshop. It is Monday, March 1st, 2021, and it is 6 p.m. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Brennan,
Here.
Vice Mayor Stone,
Here.
Councilmember Brandon,
Here.
Councilmember DeAndre,
Here.
Councilmember Prince.
Here.
For the record, this meeting is being streamed using both Zoom and YouTube. The links are on the agenda. And may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Item 1, discussion on commercial corridor design. Mr. Allen.
Mayor, members of council, at the February village council meeting, there was discussion about zoning, building design, form-based codes were mentioned as part of the discussion. It was also mentioned that we bring it to a future workshop to discuss. So here we have it tonight. Nielsa did provide me a couple of just breakdowns of the description between including and form-based, which was described in the meeting. I'll give you, or I'll just for the record, just kind of talk about them and then open it up for questions. Nielsa's here, probably do better at it than explain it than I would. But you got your traditional zoning, which is what we have based on setbacks, height, lot coverage. Then you have a form-based code instead of concentrating on land uses, meaning the use of the building primarily. This type of code is a legal design regulation that describes the desirable physical form, placement, size, bulk of buildings within the environment. It also addresses the size of the blocks, their relation to one another, encourages mixed uses, and focuses more on form of buildings and their relation to adjoining spaces in their streetscapes. It's a lot, a lot of it has to do with, there's a focus on mixed use, which we do have in our code now, but there'll be a huge focus on design of those buildings, which I think kind of spurred the conversation at the February workshop or council meeting, is just the design of those buildings. So, Nielsa, if you have anything to add, or if council wants to fire off some questions about these types, we can have that discussion here at the workshop.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, council members, the material that was provided to you shows the different type of codes. And most of them at the end, they finish with maybe there shouldn't be just one type of code, but it could be a hybrid, which means we have our traditional code right now. But if the council desires to have for example, this corridor, to have more more design input, we could do that. We could create a code that will focus on that corridor. So what I mean is we don't need to be either all form-based or all traditional. We can have a hybrid, and that's most of these information that I provided, they conclude on that. Let me know if you have questions.
I have a question. Neil said most of these larger projects, I think that we'd be talking about on US 1, go through P&Z first. If we were to use that hybrid, how would they know, in other words, who's making a determination of what fits in the village and what does not fit in the village? If we look at it that way, from a design standpoint. I understand we can't do anything else. But who makes that determination?
Well, basically, the form-based code is a code that we have to put it in the code,
Right.
in a code format. So the P&Z, for example, when somebody provides something, I will review it, Lance and I will review it like we always do, but now we're gonna have a new code to go for it. And we put together all our recommendations to the P&Z. So they're gonna continue doing their recommendation to the council, but now there will be a new code.
I hear you. What I'm trying to get around to is when you look at something instead of a conventional and you're going to form-based code, who is determining what it should look like? You know, in other words, who's doing that?
Well, basically, it could be different ways. For example, I put an example here of a community, they were having a charrette. So the community, in this case, they got together and, you know, with facilitators, and they look at that, so it was put together based on the community input, basically. Or it could be just planners that they will provide that, you know, so we'll provide some suggestions, then it will be a workshop, and then, you know, we'll get input from the council, from the planning and zoning board. So it could be community-based, or it could be just directly to provide a form-based code from a professional.
Let me,
It-
so,
yeah.
I guess to answer your question, and piggyback off Neil's a little bit, when you're doing these form-based codes, I mean, this is gonna be months and months, and it's gonna be community feedback. You're gonna wanna get your community feedback, you know, public meetings, all that, where, you know, you're talking about a look and a feel of Tequesta. You're gonna wanna get all of your citizens' feedback, and they're gonna help you and help our planners or whoever puts together this form-based code. They're gonna help you decide what that code is. And so this is not like a zoning and planning thing where you're talking about setbacks and things like that. You're gonna be talking about what it looks like, some densities, things like that. You're gonna wanna get the community feedback. And I don't know if that answers your question, but when you're building this code, it's gonna be months and months and many meetings to make sure your community's good with this feel of Tequesta, because everything along this corridor or in a commercial district is gonna look very uniform. That's what, I mean, very like form, like everything can be structured to look the same. So you gotta wanna be, make sure that all of your citizens are behind that look.
It's more intense than a building that we just put together, I would imagine. It's a full-on, what is the look of Tequesta? And putting together that code to move forward.
Right, I understand that, but it's subjective. You know, I think
don't-
sometimes if we look at things, to me, that looks dated. It doesn't look like it's in the 21st century. It looks dated, as compared to others saying, well, this is what, you know, we want that look. You know, let's just take Village Square Shopping Plaza.
Mhm.
It's been there, you know, for 50 years, I think, if you go back and look at the old. And it really doesn't look a whole lot different.
Correct.
So there is that concept of, do we want to bring Tequesta into more of a look that might look more like Tequesta Shops or might look more like the Publix Plaza, County Line Plaza? So I don't know what our look is, quite frankly. I mean, there's just, on that road, there's no real look, and really hasn't been.
And I think that's why we're having this conversation, because as things change and ownership changes, that's when the code or something, building coming in or a rebuild, or that's when they'd have to meet the standard.
Right.
And so I think that's part of the problem, is there is no,
There is no standard.
so now would be a good time to
Yeah.
start putting together a standard that, it could take 2 years to come up with that standard.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure, if it is community-based, and we do like we do now with everything that we do community-based, that there would really be an outreach and a real push, because everybody has different thoughts about what Tequesta is. And because look at River Road, where everybody is tearing down the homes that were on the river, and they're putting up very large, very contemporary, often homes. So to them, that not all the time, but very large homes, and to them, that's something that they like. So it's got to be a mixture of the community, and that was where I wanted to know how we went about that. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I think.
So are we talking about setting architectural guidelines about what and how people can build?
On US 1.
That could be part of it. You know, in that first email that Mark sent to the council, I responded to him and I said, you know, I appreciated his input, and I said, but to undertake something like this would require, same thing what the mayor's saying, significant community input over a period of time. And the other thing is again, I'm going to echo what was already said. We don't have a community standard today. We have a mix of, you know, Key West style, we have a mix of Mediterranean, we have a little bit of, I don't even know what you call something.
1950s?
Yeah, and so that corridor has no uniformity whatsoever. The other thing, in addition to the fact that you're going to get multiple visions or opinions on what the look should be, is, you know, there's a danger in too much uniformity. I want to see some creativity among the architects. I don't know how many people have been up to Hilton Head Plantation, but they have uniformity. They have a very specific design code, and it is one of the most boring and uninteresting places you could ever drive through, even though it's prohibitively expensive. But there's no imagination, there's no creativity, and you drive through it, and it's all cedar, and it's very, boring is the best word I can come up with it. So I agree. I mean, if we're going to undertake this, and I think there's merit to the idea of having some kind of an overlay to the existing code, but you're talking about a long, intense process, and trying to get everybody together on what this should look like. If you set it too rigid, I think you're going to have a very difficult time. You're going to have to allow for the architects to have some creative freedom, et cetera. But trying to come up with that concept, I think, is going to be a real challenge, and there's no guarantee we'll even get there.
Well, let me ask the fellow council people here, I mean, why would we want to do that? I mean, you know, you've got architects and stuff, and that's what they get paid to do, is to come up with creative designs and stuff to fit the building or whatever they're trying to build there, and the usage and stuff of that building. I mean, I almost feel like we're getting a little bit overboard in setting regulations up and telling people how we want their building to look. And you know, I mean, I'd almost rather let the architects come in and do their own design, and then we approve the design. I mean, but trying to get the citizens of Tequesta to come to an agreement, like you just stated, is going to be a long and arduous process if we could ever even do that. It'd be kind of like herding cats. I mean, you know, you're trying to get all these different people to agree upon certain architectural designs and stuff of what we want the city to look like. I think it's a pretty monumental task, and I don't even know if I would want to even try to do that. I mean, I'm not an architect. That's what these guys specialize in doing, is coming up with really unique and cool-looking buildings and stuff. And they get paid big money to do that. And so we're going to put ourselves in a position of becoming an architect almost.
Well, I think, you know, the idea of letting them come in and present conceptually, which is what they did with this last building, was to give them a chance to talk to this council and get some feedback. And what I've seen in the past is that they have listened, and they do, within, you know, reason, try to accommodate the feedback that they're getting from us. Not that we're not all necessarily going to agree at the end of the day, but I think they do. I think they are sensitive to it, and I think they do take that into consideration. And
I agree.
So,
If I can just add, you know, one more thing. So I've seen this form-based codes take place. They're usually in a spot like Niels was saying, maybe like in a downtown or a specific area. A lot of times in downtown, some of these older cities, they have a downtown area. They want to create that or keep that feel of a new downtown, or revitalize it, so they'll come up with standards around it. You know, a lot of times, or if there's a new community, they'll have that form-based code in place as the new community's built. It's rare that you'll see it in a town like ours that's fairly young, 40, 50 years old.
This is in Charleston.
Yeah, because you're not going, like the downtown Charleston. You know,
Correct.
I would guess there's some kind of overlay district down there.
Sure.
So you don't see it in a town like ours, 50 years old, where we don't have very much infill to do. There's not going to be a lot of revitalization.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you're probably looking at, even if you set the code today or tomorrow, I mean, before you start seeing the same uniform feel, it'll be 50 years down the road.
Exactly.
I mean, so, you know, if you guys choose to go down that path, just keep that in mind. You won't reap the benefits of this for many, many years to come.
And I agree with that.
Nielsen, in your professional opinion, do you think this is a good idea?
What I think, maybe it is worth it to take a look at the corridor and maybe think about an overlay. Because our code applies in general. In the corridor, it's like, okay, let's just look at the corridor. What are the existing zonings? We have mixed use, we have C2. Oh, it's right there, the map. You see? All the gray is mixed use. All the red is C2. So, and they do require different, different regulations, the C2 and the mixed use. So many cities, what they do is they put together a corridor plan. Corridor plan is basically, let's take a look the corridor itself and not what each zoning requires. So if we can, for example, and then we can create language, maybe we need more landscaping or less landscaping. So we can create just a zoning language overlay, and we even can include some graphics, you know, as part of this code, as part of this overlay. If you go to the Palm Beach Gardens Code, they do have an overlay for the PGA. PGA Boulevard has kind of specific regulations. They have the, and still, the zoning will be the same, commercial, mixed use, but then we can add that overlay that says, okay, it could be more stringent or less or something. I think it's worth it to take a look at the corridor itself, you know, but it doesn't need to be form-based, full force. That's what I'm saying.
I would agree with that, and I think we should look at it and not something that is really tight, but more of a larger concept, I guess, with more options. I know that my travels throughout the United States, I've enjoyed being in the communities when you knew you arrived at that community. You knew you were there. You just don't know why you were there, but you knew you were. It fit. And I think there's a lot of value in knowing that when you come over the bridge on US 1, you're in Tequesta and it's clear. Now, I agree it could take 50 years to get to that point, but I think we need to at least be looking forward and start that conversation and start that concept. So if we don't
Again,
start,
though,
no one will.
Kyle, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I like being able to recognize that you're in the village of Tequesta, but there's not that many places to really build on the corridor, number one. I mean, secondly, you're gonna have to start tearing stuff down in order to build, because there's just not any vacant land. So, I mean, we're talking about embarking upon this task, and we don't really have that much places to really build on. And so is it really worth our time to go through this process when we've only got extremely limited amounts of areas to do, unless we start tearing old buildings down and building, you know, new? I mean, I'm up for it if you guys as a group, you know, want to take it on and stuff, but I almost feel like it's a waste of our time.
So I wouldn't want to go full form. I don't want to look too matchy-matchy. Like when you go to Abacoa, I don't want to be
Correct.
like that. Absolutely not.
Exactly.
Yep.
However, to bring some sort of cohesiveness to where, for the future's sake, when we get into redevelopment and redesign, such as you mentioned, some of the buildings have been there, they're original. One day, they're going to probably either be torn down or added on and changed completely. So I would like to see council put something, even if it's small, something in place as a guideline. I wouldn't want to go full form, but if we could add something for some bullet points, whether they're architectural elements, something on the roof, like little things that they have to include, and then the architect could get creative of how they want to do that, but it'll keep some sort of cohesive element all together, with each building having its own charm and character, depending on how the architecture wants
I
to
agree,
design
yeah.
it.
The design guideline could be exactly like that. It could be like a menu. You know, if you are doing balconies, you can put A, B, C, D. It doesn't mean that all the balconies will be the same, but, you know, they can choose, or if they are doing roofs, they can do this or that, or if they are doing signage. Basically, design guideline is to give options to the, you know, to the designer, so they can pick and choose, but still it's all kind of cohesive at the end.
Again, I agree. I think the overlay concept has some merit, but I think, again, you're going to have to create concepts so people can visualize it, and as the mayor said, it's going to require a lot of community input. This is not something that the five of us sitting here are going to make a determination in and of ourselves. We need to make sure that there is community input, and as the manager said, this is something that's going to have impacts way down the road. And to Bruce's point, we've got so many other things to address. This is going to be something that we do over time, and so it may take us a year or two to develop this, particularly with the community input aspect of it.
It should.
You know, and then you roll it out at whatever the appropriate time is. But getting that community buy-in, I think, is absolutely critical. And like I said, that's going to be a real challenge.
One thing that I've seen, and I've lived around the country quite a bit myself, from California to all over, but the things that I always like to see is maybe making more regulations insofar as landscaping goes, to where you really soften the building up and you don't make it look like it's sticking out like a sore thumb. And landscaping can really add a lot of curb appeal to any building and stuff, and it doesn't make it look like you're in a concrete, corridor. And strengthen that up and the requirements and stuff on that, and I've always been an advocate of that. And I can tell you, I won't bore you with details and stuff of situations where we have changed those things in other cities and stuff that I've lived in. And it really makes a huge improvement, in my opinion, obviously. That's all I can tell you. And I'd really rather think to try to look maybe more at that and then let the architects do their thing, and then we come in and we approve their projects. We still have the say-so whether we want to approve it or not. We still have the option of making suggestions and stuff, and most people that have come before us here since I've been here in this short period of time always seem willing to accommodate us with some of our ideas and suggestions. But, if we could strengthen up the landscaping side, it was just like when they were talking about the building the other day, about doing some rooftop landscaping. That really softens the building up. It makes it more of a green building than just having a big concrete, block and stucco building and stuff sticking out there on the corridor. You can really do a lot of magical things and stuff with landscaping alone and really make it a lot more appealing to the eye when you're riding down the corridor. When you come down and all of a sudden you see a lush area with palm trees and different types of trees and bushes and stuff like that, that would be something that, you come over the bridge and say, dang, this looks nice. They really, done it. And we all need to plan anyway. I mean, it's a proven fact. Palm trees really aren't that good of a, greenhouse gas emission absorber, but at least it does absorb some of it. And I think that's what I would like to
And I
maybe
really like
look
that
at.
idea. So that could always be one of the elements on the menu, so to speak. And I know that's kind of an irritation by people when towns come in and there's a very cold building and then they say, well, we're gonna cover it with trees, but then it's never really actually covered with trees. So having landscaping included for a guideline could be a great option.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
With regard to landscaping, our current comprehensive plan includes a number of policies with regard to urban forestry. Urban forestry is extremely important for exactly, the climate change and all of that. So anyway, and that is also an aesthetic feature, but urban forestry is a big part of it. And along the way, we might need to have some policies in place with regard to urban forestry.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think, too, when we redid US 1, part of what we were hoping to do was to do a much more robust replanning along the road, and we were trying to get DOT to absorb some of that cost, and they were unwilling. But that's something that fits into what we're talking about here, and that's something that still needs to be addressed ultimately if we can procure some funds to assist us in that process.
So if we were to make a change and we change the overlay, and now 17 years from now, when US 1 is repaved again, would they have to follow that standard?
Yes, in an ideal term, yes, but also
The state? I'm just-
every piece of owner of land on that corridor, they also will need to comply on their own lot with the standards that council will approve. The only thing is with the commercial corridors and landscaping, there is always don't screen too much because then nobody can see the buildings, or screen low. So that's the reason it has to be a balance.
But there's also, and I totally understand what you're saying, and I agree with that. I mean, too much landscaping can actually block the signs, which is another conversation that's come up before. But there are clever ways to do landscaping on buildings and around
Yes.
buildings. And then that way when people walk in too, it's welcoming and aesthetically, and it also softens whatever the
I
design
wanted to
is.
pick up on something Kyle said, too. That's, we have Treasure Coast planning, obviously, that we can engage and work with. But I think, Kyle, your comment also points to something else, that, Mayor Brennan has spent the last 8 years building tremendous relationships, at the county, the regional, and the state level. And with her stepping down, that's something we need to make sure we pick up the ball on to continue those relationships, because it's made a difference for us over these past years. And it'll make a difference for us going forward unless we let them lapse. So that's something I know I'm very cognizant of the necessity for us to to maintain that involvement, maintain those relationships, and even expand them where and if, when we can.
I'll second that.
So what would the next steps look like in this? How does one even get started in something like this? Do we kind of push this off for a while?
Well,
I'm looking at Jeremy,
it's not
and
looking
he's not looking at me.
Well, Nilsa, you gave us some articles to read through, which I did. Do you have other examples or samples that you're aware of that you think might be pertinent to a community like ours that you could share with us? I mean, again, I see this as a somewhat lengthy process, but maybe, and again, you guys can jump in, but if we could look at maybe some concepts, some ideas, things that other communities have done that have worked well for them, in situations somewhat similar to ours, that might be a helpful starting point.
Yes, I can give specific examples, So this was just, in general, the concept between traditional and form-based. But we can get in the next workshop, maybe, I don't know, other more specific examples of design guidelines or overlays. Definitely I can provide that.
Well, I would suggest maybe not the next one, but the one after, because we're going to have a new council member seated. So maybe if we come back to it, maybe in May, it would make some sense.
And I just think this should be a very slow process, and it shouldn't happen over the next year,
Yeah.
but I would say 2 to 3 years, that
Yeah.
it should be just continuing to bring in new, whatever that is.
A continued dialogue.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Mayor, we'll come up with a game plan, and we'll bring it back at a workshop. We'll have some, like a à la carte, like a menu that you guys can kind of look at, some examples. So we'll come up with a game plan and bring that back to you guys.
Okay.
I would imagine that there are, and maybe as you know, so that is a professional group that can come in and help kind of facilitate something like this or give a bunch of ideas.
I have done it.
Okay, perfect.
Yes,
Great.
I have done it. So I'm planning to bring some design guidelines that I have worked on, and obviously also other things that are overlays from other communities, like I just mentioned, the PGA overlay, for example, things that we can relate to or are close by, So I can bring other examples.
One thing and I'll add this and then I'll hush about it, but that I've seen in other cities to where they actually, change the traditional signs from, what a McDonald's sign would look like or a public sign would look like. It's a much smaller sign. It doesn't just jump out at you when you're riding down the road. And I know that that's what these people want. They want visibility. But if you want to be in the village of Tequesta, this is the kind of sign Publix is going to have. This is the kind of sign that McDonald's is going to have, and Chick-fil-A sign, and it's a lot smaller. And then you really got to look through the landscaping to know that it's there. And and I personally like that kind of feel and stuff to where you go in, and it's a lot more subtle. It's not like you're riding down the strip on Vegas or somewhere. Where you got it all the glitz and glamour and stuff. It's a much more subtle appeal, softer appeal and stuff. And personally, I really like that type of ideas and stuff in regards to if we're going to make changes and stuff to maybe look at the size of signs and increasing landscaping. That's it.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, that's the one place where I think uniformity actually
It's important.
makes sense and has a real benefit. I
Some
think
of those
that's a
signs are
gr-
really
that's a
old,
great
so
idea.
again, they might want to redo them. And just for a quick example, so you understand where I'm coming from, he said the word McDonald's. When you go out to Jupiter Farms, when it's a corporate company, that McDonald's out there fits the farms. It's designed, you feel like you're in the farm. So like Mr. Stone said, he says when you go to some places, you know you're there. You don't know, you just know it. That's one of the prime examples I'm referring to.
Yep.
And not all those buildings look the same, but just they found their way to fit and be a part of the community family.
Okay. All right, shall we move along? All right, let's do item number 2, which is a recap of the meeting that we had with 19 members of Anchorage Point. We thought we were going to have between 5 and 8.
I thought it was just going to be with one.
Well, no, it was more than one. We thought, maybe 4 or 5 people, something like that. And they learned about it, and 19 people came. And Jeremy and I did the presentation, a modified version of what we were going to do with everybody, back in March. If you remember, we were going to have a regular council meeting, public meeting. And so we basically opened it by saying we were really glad everybody was here. This was more of a less formal meeting. This was about you. What do you want to talk about? What are your concerns? What are your thoughts about this? And we can go into detail, Jeremy, if you like, but the end result was that as pleasant as everyone, but maybe one person, could have been something. Everybody was, I thought, very, very polite. But the end result, they asked us if we would excuse ourselves so they could all sit and talk together, which has really made sense. They did that for at least 20 minutes. But the end result I received from the gentleman that I know who had put this together was that, no, they're just not interested. They're not interested. It is mostly the money. They're not interested because they say that all the services they get from the sheriff are fine. Of course, we're doing fire rescue, so we've got that's something right there that is nice. A lot of them have been there for 45 years. I didn't realize it's that old, but if you looked at what Nilsa sent over, you can see the taxable value of some of these properties are down in the 300s, 400s, and 500s. That's because of homesteading and what they bought them for. But long story short, very respectful and respectfully, but they are just not. They're not going to. I don't not believe that they are going to come in voluntarily, and so that leaves us with a couple of things that we can do. Again, if council would like to do another meeting with them, the full meeting, then you can hear the same thing that we had heard as well. Based on that, council could make a decision if we want to move forward with this. Do we really want to go with this? And if so, we do the resolution. Then we go to the county. Now, one of the things they said, one of the gentlemen who lives there is Judge Kasternakis. And I know from somebody else that he was dead set against this. And he basically said, it's political, it's all political, and I will reach out to every one of those commissioners, and you all can do that too. So I don't think it would be, I don't think you're only going to see a handful of people. You'll see at least 19 of those people will go into commission chambers. But the other side of that is, and you saw the revenue that would be generated that Nilsa sent over for us. The other side of that is for our residents' sake, to spread out the cost of things, that the driving on the bridge, all of the roads that we have, Constitution Park, all these things that we have, everybody is taking advantage of. And that's good. I mean, we don't want to lock people out. But do we, on behalf of our residents, believe that we should go forward with this process and at least make the attempt to bring them into the village? Jeremy, do you have any other thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think, at the meeting, we did tell them when they asked the next steps that we are going to do another public meeting, one that's publicly noticed, go through the formal process that the county actually asked us for. And so when you said, look, that could be a step, I think it should be a step. I think we need to do a public meeting, have all council there, can hear, can answer questions, but, ultimately, I think it's going to have to be this process of an interlocal agreement. Whatever resistance we get, I think, we all kind of assumed it was, we get it from some angle anyways. We'll continue to try to minimize that by talking about the benefits, having council there to be able to talk to those people. They're pretty respectful. I don't know if they'll open up, but I think we'll continue to try to minimize that, and if there's one less person that shows up to the county commission meeting, then, the better.
Do you feel that there's any sentiment among the commission, I know we've talked about this in the past, to take the steps that, Broward did and basically say, okay, these pockets no longer make sense, and basically say, we are going to say to these pockets, whatever municipality you are geographically associated with, you are going to have to go into those municipalities. I mean, Broward did it. We've talked about that in the past, but do we sense that the commission, the Palm Beach County Commission, is ready to seriously consider taking that step, or are they still ambivalent?
I haven't seen it on their radar at all. When Jeremy and I went and visited a couple of commissioners about this, they understood it and thought that that made sense, because you look at this little tiny piece of land at the end of, in the middle of Tequesta here. But they, as far as I know, there has never been an effort by Palm Beach County to do what Broward County did.
Okay.
And I don't know how they did it, or, back then, or why they did it, but it just makes sense. And of course, trying to get that done at the state level as well, so that annexation.
Yeah, we've talked about the state.
Right, so I haven't seen it, Frank,
Okay.
at all.
So
And when we've been speaking, nobody ever has brought that up.
So Maria's never brought, I know there was some discussion with Maria about this at some
Took
point,
a
but,
step further. Nielsen set up a meeting with their planning director. We went over there. I actually asked that question. Hey, Broward County did it, made an initiative, and they said that basically that's great, but, they look at them on an individual basis. While, the county would like to get rid of all the enclaves because it creates a whole planning problem for them.
right.
The county has not taken that step. They haven't made that bold statement.
Are there other municipalities aside from us that have raised this issue in any concerted way? Or are we the only ones that are voicing it at this time?
I don't think we're the only ones. I know Jupiter is part of their strategic plan. They have the same strategic thing that we have. They have,
Right.
annexation issues as well. So there are communities throughout Florida that have the same issues. And I don't know how loud they're yelling or how loud they're speaking. But I know that others have a concern, which is why the state's probably taken it up and took it up 5 years ago.
Right.
It's because there are some concerns.
Well, with the municipalities in Palm Beach County, through the biggest cities, is there an avenue through them to try and bring the various municipalities together to collectively put this forth as an issue that we need to address, for Palm Beach County? Is there?
Florida League of Cities has taken it on, but I don't know.
No, but I'm saying, but within Palm Beach County, we've got the Palm Beach County group, the Palm Beach County municipalities. Is there any avenue through that group?
I am not aware of it.
Okay.
I am not aware of it.
Okay.
So-
I have brought it up in government affairs a couple of times, and Mayor Dan does it for me, for whatever reason. He decides to speak and talks about Tequesta and pockets. But there's never been an appetite for it.
Okay.
There really isn't an appetite for it at this time.
Well, what was your number one reason for not wanting to be annexed in, other than the cost of it?
Pretty much that was it.
I think that was.
So it comes down to money.
They are happy with their level of service, and they they don't want to pay 120% when they should be paying, they want to pay 95%.
Mhm.
So, that was the general consensus.
Well, let me ask you something. If you annex that area in, with the additional revenue, could you bring down the rates because of that additional revenue throughout the city? Because you're gaining, say, $300,000. And so with that influx of additional revenue in the cost of, the extra cost of maintaining that area, could you not spread that saving, that extra cash out amongst everybody and bring our rates down for everyone in the city? And also lower theirs somewhat too, compared to what it is today and existing?
That would be the idea, that we do that. Obviously, let's look at when we do bring them in, we also, the roads are, we kind of analyzed this already, but the roads are in pretty good shape, and we wouldn't have to force anything with that. The codes would meet their codes they have now. So the village's cost, in theory, on the high level service would not go up. And so we could take that $350,000 or whatever that revenue we got for it and reduce our taxes to our citizens.
But it really doesn't reduce theirs. let's be clear about that, because right now, if they come in, they have to pay even if we were to reduce it for the whole village, they're still going to be paying significantly
I
more.
understand that, Abby.
Yeah, and that's what they said.
Yeah.
But you know, that's the right question, because when we've talked about this question in the past, we didn't isolate it to just Anchorage Point. We said, if we could bring all the pockets in, okay, now you've got a bigger revenue source.
You leverage it down.
Now you could lower the millage rate.
Exactly.
Potentially across everybody. So, yes, they would pay more, but the increase, the net increase would be less if we were able to lower the millage rate across the board, which is why I think the concept of annexation, while we can do it piecemeal,
You do it all.
the ideal thing would be to get all these pockets in at
Exactly.
one time, and then be able to demonstrate what the benefits of that would be.
Because I know if I'm a homeowner and, you know, and I'm sitting there and my taxes are gonna go up $10,000 a year, I mean, you know, it's $800 a month, you know, additional money that I'm paying, and nothing's changed for me, you know, the way that I look at it. I mean, I'm still gonna have the same roads, same fire department, same police department, and nothing's gonna change, but I'm spending $8,000 to $10,000 more a year. You know, and nothing's really changed for me. So, I mean, that's an emotional thing for them to have to come up with. I mean, that's their golfing for the year or whatever the case may be. Or, you know,
Well, and when we try to do the pockets along Riverside, you know, basically, the people who are opposed are coming out and saying, you know what, we already get the benefit of all the services. So what's really gonna change, you know? The Tequesta police are driving up and down that road anyways. We service a lot of these places for,
Right.
public, you know, for fire rescue anyway. So they're like, you're gonna pay more, but what are you really gaining? And they are gaining something, and we try to share that and demonstrate that, but, you know, as you said, you've got some people that are just gonna look at purely dollars and cents.
Sure.
And that's the only thing that matters to them.
Exactly.
Just as an example, you know, one of it was, what do you want? You know, what would entice you
Yeah.
to come into the village? And along the way, we've been hearing undergrounding, that they would like to see undergrounding in that area.
Utilities?
Pardon?
Utilities?
Yeah.
Just, yeah, the undergrounding of the utilities. And that, and then there was another thing that the drainage. There's some roads in there that, not the whole place, but they're just like in front of certain homes drainage. And essentially, and they all kind of jumped right onto it, was, it's not enough. In other words, getting those things is not enough. And it was almost as if, well, you abate our taxes. What did the one man say?
15 years.
15 years, abate the taxes. You know, do the undergrounding ourselves. But then it came back to it, and it was just, no, we like it just the way it is. It's going to be interesting.
So I love the fact that we're talking about this, and I think it's important that we had that conversation, and I'm glad you did that. I wish it was just with a handful of people, but
Yeah, we did.
now that, you know, I do think we should move forward in having a full-on conversation with this group. I think it's, in my opinion, I think that our community as a whole in this area, as we kind of, not necessarily, Tequesta, the people that have the address Tequesta, might not be the village of Tequesta, but it's Tequesta, that they have benefited over the years. And it's a great community. And I think the village of Tequesta had a big impact on that. And my biggest concern is, and my belief is, if we don't go forward and work with trying to annex the area that has the Tequesta address, that we are, as a landlocked that we are going to get in a situation where we're going to lose the values of our community for a couple of reasons. One, the cost continues to go up to have the police and the fire that we have. And I think for our employees' sake, we should move forward in doing this as well. So it's a combination of 15 years out from now, it's going to look completely different if we don't work together to try to block this off. If you look at the way the costs have happened, have exponentially increased, our expenses on operations have gone down. At some point, we're going to have to either raise taxes, or we're going to have to reduce benefits, or we're going to have to annex. And I think to be able to strengthen and lengthen the wonderful thing that Tequesta is, we have to absolutely continue to move forward with the annexation. And that's just.
Well, I think you're going to eventually have to raise taxes anyway. I mean, prices obviously are never going to stop going up for everything. And so, you know, eventually, regardless of whether we index them in or not, taxes are going to go up. It just costs more to do business.
Well, there's a couple of factors there,
Yeah.
though. I mean, you've got the increase that occurs even if you've got a homestead cap. So the other thing is with the turnover we've had in the community, where we've had a lot of older residents move out and a lot of younger families move in, and when they buy those homes, they get revalued.
Exactly.
We've got opportunities, we've talked about development, we do have, as everybody's pointed out, we're pretty landlocked, but we've got sea glass going up. Hopefully the townhomes north of Publix will go in. We've got the Mastriani building potentially. We've talked about maybe some redevelopment along that corridor, so those will all be pluses to our income stream. But I agree with Kyle, I mean, ultimately, we've got this geographic area that should be one village. Now, again, I think, as the mayor's pointed out, we can try and annex them each in individual pieces, but, you know, again, Anchorage Point, you're gonna run into some political opposition on that. I mean, the judge has already made that very clear. Whether that will carry the day or not, I don't know, but I do think we can look at that as a strategy, but again, I think trying to work with the commission, trying to work with the state as well, even if it takes us 2, 3, 4, 5 years, to try and get a comprehensive plan that allows us to bring these people in, hopefully en masse, that would be the ideal solution. Whether we can get there or not, I don't know.
Let me ask
But I
a couple-
agree, I think we should be trying.
Yep.
Yeah, let me ask a couple questions. No, why is it that it was never part of Tequesta in the first place? Does anybody know that?
No, I don't.
I mean, so how did that little finger down there become Jupiter and the rest of it's
It's
Well, it's
Tequesta?
not Jupiter, it's just
not Jupiter.
unincorporated.
It's unincorporated.
Well, Lord, unincorporated, well, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah. Jupiter was not gonna give it to us.
I mean, so that's kind of baffling to me, is how that it never became part of Tequesta in the first place.
My guess is it was probably there before the country club, or
Yep.
there was somebody that owned land there before the country club, somebody got the country club land, wanted to develop that. Those people, or whoever owned that land, didn't want to be a part of that process, and so country club was built, Tequesta was formed, and those people just stayed outside.
Annexing has
I guess,
happened.
I don't
The
know.
north side of Riverside was annexed in, because she never used to be in Tequesta, and she was very excited when she became annexed into Tequesta.
But you got-
The
you-
last yellow house.
Yeah, as you
On the
can see,
north
Bruce,
side.
you got pockets all over the place. You got Bermuda Terrace, which is a big pocket. You've
Yeah.
got pockets along the river. You got
There's about 9
pockets along
pockets.
the
They're
riverside.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you got the one single pocket that we asked the question about on US 1, where Nilsa pointed out, well, even though it's a single piece of property on the commercial corridor, it's considered part of the enclave behind it. So, yeah, I mean, if you brought all of that in and looked at the revenue stream, and again, as the manager said, you got to look at the cost elements too, of servicing those areas for roads and, you know, and storm sewer and the rest.
Well, that's what I'd really like to understand more, is the benefits of doing that, so that I could get more engaged and more behind, you know, us doing this, because I'm sympathetic and understanding of someone, you know, having to shell out additional money and nothing's changed for them. So I would like to really understand, you know, long-term, you know, the benefits to the homeowners as well as for the village of Tequesta and all the other people and stuff that live and reside here and pay taxes for the things that we do provide.
So,
And I'd like to try to focus a little bit on those things so that I can, so that I can understand more of the benefits long-term. I mean, this is gonna be a long-term deal, so, because once it's annexed in, should it be annexed in, it's gonna be for eternity. It's never gonna go
Right.
back.
Right.
So this is gonna be forever. And so I'd like to be able to look at it from that perspective and see long-term, you know, the real benefits of not only for the residents there, but also for the village that has to maintain all
So I
that.
have a presentation, let me set up the time, we'll sit down and talk about it, I'll go through the presentation, I can go through we have it down, I mean, Nils has done an excellent job, I mean, the mayor's been part of it, Lance,
Mhm.
it's all helped us together, so.
See, I've got
we can
it.
go through that before the public meeting, so
Yeah.
you're aware, be able to have.
Yeah, I'd like that.
And I can do that with anybody else if you guys prefer, but
so do you have the unincorporated value, taxable value?
we do.
Okay.
Well,
Oh, yeah,
we need to update it, so
Yep.
we got it from a year ago for Anchorage Point, that particular.
But no, I'm talking
The whole thing.
the whole thing.
Not
just Anchorage
We need
Point.
to update all of it, so
Okay.
I know at some point they've done the numbers, but, I mean, the other parts are even older than that.
Yeah.
So you'd have to give us time for the other areas, I think it's I mean, if you wanna take that bite, I would say we try to stick to this area, this particular.
The reason I'm asking and I think this would be, Bruce would like this too, is if we had that total unincorporated value, taxable value, we would know what additional revenue would be every year, ballpark. I don't know if that's something that we can do or if that's very difficult to do, But I would think that, knowing that, we can back into how many years would it take to bury all the lines within this area? How much could we reduce the taxes for all of the residents? Knowing that would be priceless to be able to move forward.
That's not difficult to do.
Yeah.
Those are just spreadsheets to put together.
Okay.
But to annex those pocket areas, we tried in 2013, and it was extremely difficult because not all those pocket areas are enclaves. So the definition of enclave is what makes Anchorage Point and Bermuda Terrace different than some of the others. Because if they are not enclaves, they need to vote.
Right.
And when they vote,
Yep.
what happened in 2013.
So I would say just for enclaves only. I don't think I would just stick with just those areas that are deemed a enclave.
Okay.
But
Do we call that?
I'd like to go back and go to your first request. I would look at all the pockets, because ultimately, that's what you're really saying.
Have two.
If you brought all the pockets in, what would the benefits be? And then ultimately, when you haven't, now again, how we get these folks in is a different story. But if you do all of them, you're also going to have all the separate segments too. So you'll have it both ways.
It's just an
It is
spreadsheet.
a
We can
spreadsheet.
provide all that information.
Yeah.
Not a
So
problem.
Total enclave.
Yes.
Well-
Separate.
Enclave and just pocket areas, not a problem.
I think it would be great to, to entertain the idea to do them all at one time, but, there's something to be said for doing a little piece here and there, because when you try to do them all at one time, you're gonna create a lot of opposition all at one time. And so you combine all that opposition, it's gonna be really difficult, in my opinion, Frank, to try to do them all at once. There's a little strategy involved, I think, in trying to do a few at a time, or one at a time, or two at a time. It's just obviously, again, my opinion, but I think it'd be great to try to do it all at once and be done with it.
The past experience we had, because we tried to do the Chapel Hill in that section, and and Nilsa did a great job of doing the analysis there. And at a certain price point, people's taxes actually weren't going up, because they don't have to pay the taxes for public, fire and rescue to the county anymore. For some people, it went up. But then again, along Riverside, where the more expensive homes were, they were going to get hit a little harder.
Right.
And those were the people who were just voraciously opposed to it. So it ended up, even though we had some strong support, it ended up going down. It's going to be very difficult, I'll be honest. I think to try and get people to voluntarily come in
It's gonna be hard.
is going to be extremely difficult. So it's
Yeah.
either going to be enclaves,
Yeah.
or we work through the county, we work through the state to get to a point where they no longer have a choice, and those governmental entities saying, this makes no sense economically, to have these little enclaves and have us trying to service them.
Right.
You need to be part of this municipality.
I think it would be interesting, though, to see what it would be revenue-wise to have all of the different areas and stuff included in our budget. And then with the sea glass that you mentioned, bringing that revenue and stuff in, the building out there.
townhomes and Mastriani
and then
building
you got that
potentially.
piece out on County Line Road and stuff, and once that's developed, and hopefully one day it will be. We're gonna have some pretty serious additional revenue coming in off of those projects. And then you pick all those things up. I mean, it'd be interesting to see if we could actually bring our rates down.
Yeah.
And it'd be, the numbers, proof's in the numbers. I'm a numbers guy, so it's all about the numbers, and the numbers speak for themselves. And people would have no objection at that point. It'd be a win-win for everybody. If the numbers produce that, result.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, I think we have to have one story,
Yeah.
and you have to approach it one enclave at a time.
Well, no, what I was saying, Kyle, was that, to look at all of it.
Correct.
And bring
Correct.
it all in.
Yep.
With the additional revenue from sea glass and the Mosquito and stuff, bringing all that stuff in and looking at. But that's an exorbitant amount of work, in addition to what you guys are already doing to try to put that together. But that would be a much easier sale to get people to come on board with the idea of the annexation if it wasn't gonna cost anymore. It's all about money. It's money for us, it's revenue for us, the city, the village.
Yep.
And it's out of the pockets of these people,
But like you said earlier, Bruce, you think taxes would have to rise. at some point. And I
Yeah, they're
agree,
going to.
I completely agree that that's going to have to happen unless the annexation of the area takes
Well,
place.
Kyle, they're gonna go up regardless, pal. I mean, you know, we're not, you know, for us to sit here and think that it's not gonna go up. It might not be in our lifetime, but, you know, taxes are gonna go up. I mean, you know, a loaf of bread when I was a kid was, you know, 20 cents. Now it's, you know, $3. So, I mean, it's gonna, prices are gonna continue to go up. It's not gonna stop. It might be delayed in going up, should we be able to do all this stuff. And so that's great. The longer you can forestall those taxes from going up, it's great.
And and I agree with that, and that's why I think for our residents, we have to move forward.
I agree. Anything we can do to save money for our, you know, the residents and
Yeah.
stuff is what, part of our responsibility. I agree 100%.
All right, so let me recap.
Good luck.
Because we were all over the place. We still want to go forward with the meeting just with Anchorage Point, is that correct? So that we're not going to try to look at a bigger picture right now. We still want to go forward with that.
Well, I still think we want to look at the bigger picture before that meeting.
Okay.
Have those numbers, which is just a spreadsheet.
Who can y'all do that?
Excuse me?
Can y'all do that?
In
You talking about y'all putting
2011
it all together?
In 2011, I put together a comprehensive strategic plan, which included all those different packages and enclaves
All the
with a
enclaves?
spreadsheet.
Yeah.
So obviously now, we have to update those spreadsheets, but
Correct.
the original ones are there. It will take time to update all of them. We started with some of them last year, but not all the packet areas. They are like 8 or 10. That includes all those, pocket and enclaves. It takes some time, but there is already like a format,
All
We'll
right,
just
so,
hold off on any public meeting until we provide those numbers for you. We can get those out, maybe March workshop or something, we can provide those for you.
This is the March workshop.
Or April workshop.
Yes.
We have a March 29th.
If you can do it for the March workshop, I'm going to be really
Well,
impressed.
April, whatever we can
I'm
provide
I'm kidding
you,
you, Jeremy,
at
I'm
that
kidding
point,
you.
Then we'll decide on, the public meeting on a setting a date for that, so we'll
Okay.
get those to you before we move forward.
Well, Jeremy, you've been kind of quiet in the conversation about all this. What's your take on this?
Oh, is that me again? No, I mean, I think it's, you asked the question, like, you need to see the benefits, or you need to see the benefits for the homeowners, the benefits for the citizens. To me, it's a no-brainer for our citizens. I mean, the bridge, roads, parks, for them to say that they're not utilizing those things. I mean, code compliance, when you drive in the city, to get to their house when they got a relative that comes in to visit, I mean, what would they rather have, the village of Tequesta beautification, or would they rather not have anybody there and you see trailer parks coming through? So they utilize every service that we have, and so they're just not paying that service. So, I mean, to say that we don't do it, I mean, for the sake of our citizens, but it's a no-brainer for me. I understand their side, they don't want to pay additional taxes, but, I mean, who does? If I can put my house right in the middle of Tequesta and not pay taxes, yeah, I'd love to do that. I mean, so to me, it's easy conversation to say that we owe it to our citizens to try to move forward annexation. I also add, just to circle back to the tax conversation, I mean, obviously, we've done a lot with staff in the last year and a half to try to minimize any impacts of taxes. We don't have just for the record, we don't have any plans to increase taxes. Hopefully, I mean, we'll look at our operating costs, but just for the sake of it, in the near future, we don't have any plans to raise taxes. So, in case anybody's listening and heard that.
We don't want to get the phone ringing in the morning
We
there.
don't have any intention of doing that. We'll obviously look at all of our operating costs and our staff costs. We still do have a very tight budget, but our plan is not to raise that.
And I think, and when we talk about that, I think we got to distinguish between the millage rate and what people pay in taxes. Because again, if you have an increase in your housing value, you're going to be capped at 3%, but you will be paying a bit more each year. So there is a tax increase in essence, in terms of dollars and cents built in. I think our goal has always been to try and hold the line on that millage rate.
Sure.
And not increase what we're taking out of people's pockets beyond, I'll say inflationary elements.
Are there any legal issues that you can think of that we need to talk about or discuss?
While he's getting that, the other thing I would say in the meantime, while we're putting together these numbers, is they'll be getting them soon.
Yeah.
So, I think it's important that we start doing that.
Just one thing on that point is that, please remember, many of these Anchorage Point residents are snowbirds. If we are thinking to have a large public meeting, that the reason last year we were planning for March before the April, so just if we want to maximize participation and input, we really need to be aware of that March, April window.
Okay.
To answer Mr. Prince's question, at this point, to me, you're in a area that needs, that the political issues need to be resolved and the policy issues need to be resolved. Once we actually get to a point where we're ready to move forward, then we will obviously make sure that the process is handled correctly, whether it's interlocal agreement or a referendum or whatever. But at this point, other than keeping timing in mind, we're in March, interlocal agreement can be entered into at any time. And again, has political implications in getting the votes on the county commission. The referendums are going to be cyclical with your election cycle, so you need to keep that timing in mind, as Nils has said. But no, at this point,
No. Okay.
really, you're more political and policy.
Yeah.
That was one of my questions, and you just brought it up as well. If council is definitely wanting to go forward with this meeting, this is what I'm hearing, then the work with the commissioners could start sooner than later. And if anybody has any particular commissioner that they know personally, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just go out like I do and talk to most of them, because I do know most of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm happy to relinquish that unless you want me to just take the first hit at it and then you can go back.
I would say it'd be nice to put together kind of a multifaceted approach to talk to Jeremy. Maybe Jeremy, you can help coordinate who's talking to who and when they're talking to who. I know a handful of them. I know some other people that can reach out to him. And so I can give him a list of people that I can connect with. And maybe there's a way that we can facilitate that.
Okay, sounds good. Then I'll wait to hear from you.
We'll make it work, but we'll do it in the near future. We'll start running.
I think the conversation needs to start, and I know that I need to have that map over that. We went to see Mayor Kerner. And you have the map, and you have it there in front of you, and we're like, this is what we're talking about. It's like, whoa, that, 35 homes.
Visuals always help.
Right. So just having that again, because a lot of people are not meeting in person. Dave did that day, but some of the commissioners prefer to do a Zoom meeting,
Okay.
which is fine, as long as we get that piece of paper in front of them.
Yep.
As well. And it could take, several conversations. But yeah, I believe that, especially if we go, and we are going to go forward with this next meeting, there's going to be pressure from the people in the neighborhoods then that will be knocking on those doors as well.
Did we ever obtain a copy of the Broward ordinance or order that underlaid the requirement that the enclaves go into?
I can get it.
Can you get a copy? Because I've never actually seen the written order, and I'd like to,
Right.
I'm assuming the rest of us would probably like to see how they orchestrated that.
Excellent. All right, are we wrapped up on this for now?
I think so.
All right. Let's go on to item number 3, which is the discussion of naming rights for the community center.
So as of the last meeting, we had a discussion, and this has been an ongoing discussion. It wasn't just last meeting, about discussion on naming rights for the community center. I put together kind of a draft policy, and when I say draft, I mean this is kind of a baseline. I looked at a handful of naming rights policies, guidelines. There were a lot of similarities in those. There were some differences. I have seen, not that I'm advocating any of these, but I have seen that some policies that actually form a committee that will look at naming rights, if you're talking they give it to a committee to kind of vet. After an individual, named after an individual, I think I had one, I saw one that says that the man has been deceased for 5 years. Those are things that, you don't have to. I do see that if you're talking about just naming after somebody or an organization that, they've had a significant contribution to Tequesta or the state or the nation, there is something in here, about, fundraising or purchasing of naming rights. That was a very small area, that probably could be looked at a little bit more. With all this policy, if you guys have read it, I'm open to questions, we can amend any of this. Legal's looked at it, any of the concerns that they had, I think they did a couple of tweaks to my original policy, but, it has vetted through legal. So with that, if you guys have questions or comments or, what's your thoughts on this, we can take it and go through the process a little further.
The only initial comment I had was, we said that somebody had to be dead for a period of 5 years. I know when Russell White passed away.
Yeah, we didn't have this policy.
Yeah, the council moved forward to name the maintenance facility after him. I don't know that that's a necessity. I think somebody passes and that person, for whatever reason, warrants, the council at that time feels that that person warrants some type of recognition in this fashion. I don't look at this like the Hall of Fame for football or baseball where you have to be retired for 5 years. I think if something is appropriate, I would let the council act on that as they saw fit.
Who's the guy here on the logo for Tequesta?
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows?
Tequesta Indians weren't actually even here. They were down in Miami.
It's a composite of what they thought the Hopi Indians that were here and the Tequesta tribe. So it was actually commissioned, and they took a little bit of each of those tribes, basically, and put it together. I think it was Dottie Campbell that commissioned that.
Yeah, I think that's true, yeah.
And, but it's not any particular tribe, just that there was.
Right.
Yeah, because that was one of the funnier stories is that the people that developed the country club did not want it to be named for the tribe that literally was here. They liked the name Tequesta, and that's how they did this. It was the name.
Maybe to help with this conversation too, I would say that kind of the foundation for a lot of the policies was that, it's not an evergreen, when we do name, somebody does purchasing rights, it's not forever.
Right.
When they get to that point where we reach out to them or they reach out to us with a specific, price, at that point, council can say, well, that's worth 10 years, that's worth 15 years, but it shouldn't be, for, evergreen. Obviously they can't have any business coming up with a village at a point like that. I think that's kind of stating the obvious, but there were a couple other, things that were part of this, is that, give ourselves an option to get out at some point.
And who is coming up with the names?
Well, if it's like, it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about like if we're a specific company that says, I want to, donate $250,000, they can name that. And obviously council has the overall authority to say, no, we're rejecting that. We don't want that name. Come up with something different. So ultimately council will, but, if I'm McDonald's and I want to say I want to name a McDonald's community center or community McDonald's room, if council doesn't like, you guys can reject that naming rights, that money that comes with that. So ultimately, you guys have the authority to accept or reject anything.
One of the things I saw in here that was concerning is that it says case-by-case basis. Talked about case-by-case basis
At the end.
on the amount. And shouldn't there be, in advance of all of this, shouldn't there be some research? I don't know if it's a company that basically says, this is what your gymnasium would be worth in naming rights in the open market.
Right.
Because you wouldn't want to have one person come in and say, yeah, I'll give you $200,000, let's say. And then you say, okay, well, I can do this on a case by case, but then the guy behind him, I would have paid $250,000 for that. And how do you stay out of trouble, in other words, in terms of being too flexible?
So it's always good to have some, even if they're not, there's always good to have some kind of criteria by which to evaluate and approve, even if the criteria are not, hard, concrete, numeric, black and white, but still things to at least consider and weigh. A lot of that is, you have criteria, and a lot of your quasi-judicial proceedings, for example, is this in conformance with public health, safety, and welfare. Things, it's not a hard criteria, it's a subjective criteria, but there's still things to evaluate it by. So I think as we get to a point where we have a policy that we want to present to the council for final adoption, that we would want to put some kind of criteria to protect the village, if nothing else, from the very thing that you're talking about. It can't be completely arbitrary and capricious each time. There has to be some measure by which you weigh those offers. And I mean, I don't have a perfect answer as we sit here tonight, but it is always good to have some type of criteria that you use in your policy, so that there's consistency, at least in how you evaluate those kinds of things.
So in my mind, what we're talking about is putting out a request for proposal, so we get, 3-4 months out from the center, we put out a request for proposal, anybody want naming rights, submit your proposal. In theory, if we get 3 or 4, there would be a high bidder, but maybe have some criteria about, their contribution to the community too. Maybe your cost is, weighted higher or lower depending on what you want, but we would put together criteria, which put out a request for proposal, and that's what, in my mind, that's what I was thinking, but if
Sure.
we want to go a different route,
Basically, the same way you put a job out for bid.
Yeah, I hate to pay a consultant to come in and tell, spend $10,000 to tell us what we should, what we should pay for our rooms, but,
Right.
if that's what you guys think,
No.
I think that's maybe better than a request.
And we can definitely put it out like that, but there would have to be very clear language that the council can reject any and every offer for any or no reason. I mean, that's a very personal thing, these naming rights. So at the end of the day, even if you have some offer that's through the roof,
Right.
and you don't think that
It's in the best
the name
interest.
is appropriate, then you absolutely have the right to just say no.
Yeah.
I'll
Just for the record, so anyone listening, this is for rooms and not for the whole building. The building itself is the Village of
Right.
Tequesta Community Center. These are for rooms inside.
Yeah, I think we all
Right.
agreed on that at the last meeting, that.
Yeah, I just
that-
want to make sure no
yes.
one's getting confused.
Yeah, and I think, I brought up futures as a possibility for the gymnasium. They've made a commitment to contribute to the community already. So that was the one that came to mind for me, because I also have a relationship with the folks there. But to Jeremy's point, I think the idea of an RFP is good. I think having some criteria around it is important, because you don't want to just sell it. It's not just the highest bidder process, and so I think that makes a lot of sense.
I think we're advertised enough, and I'm strongly opposed to the idea of naming a room, a building, anything, that putting it out to bid. I think we should live within our own means. And I think if you move forward with this, you're opening up a can of worms that no one wants. Even Publix was boycotted last month. You stay away from it, you live within your own means. I really don't want my kids to go and be advertised at the community center. Just don't. So that's my opinion.
That's interesting.
What was the concept of having the named rooms and sponsored to set
Raise
back
money.
some of the costs?
I think the idea was that
Leslie?
it helps offset costs, frees up money for other purposes.
Can we put a name on a truck?
Yeah, I don't.
Where's it
I don't-
stop?
Well, I think this was specific to the community center, and I don't think we were looking at running wild with this thing, but if there were some entities within the community particularly that were willing to, contribute financially, and that would be a benefit to the residents. This is not a kind of thing where you're going to walk in and there's going to be a TV showing commercials for a particular thing. This is just a name on a room or name on a building. Universities, schools do this all the time. It's a pretty common practice. And as Jeremy said, it's not in perpetuity. It's usually for a defined period of time. But there is a benefit to the community if it's done properly, so.
I'm okay with doing bricks.
Well, bricks are just a smaller version of this. But I think it's worth exploring, and I think it's worth just seeing what level of interest there might be. And again, as the council will have ultimate authority to say yea or nay, so.
Well, but Kyle has brought up more of a, I guess it would be theoretical in nature, that do we even want to go down this road? And do we want to have any naming rights at all?
Is there a need for extra finance for the community center?
I think that is there a need for more funding? Yes, there's always a need for more funding.
But at what price,
Absolutely.
right? What do you sacrifice?
Well, see, that's what you're saying, and I
Yeah.
understand that. That's what I'm hearing. So I'm recognizing that as a piece of this. So I guess it's really, does council, just in a consensus basis, or even just like, are we interested in exploring this?
Well, I'm always interested in exploring ideas to generate free money. I mean, that's essentially what it is. I mean, if you can put, you know, I mean, you see plaques and stuff all the time in different facilities where people
Right.
donate money for the playground equipment or whatever and stuff, you know, or the tennis court and stuff, you know, they pay to have it redone or whatever and stuff, you know what I mean? So it's not a bad concept, to all frank. I mean, you see it a lot. I mean, I haven't really thought about it, obviously, and so I kind of like noodle on it, but I think that anything that's a way to generate revenue for the city and stuff to help offset costs and stuff, I think it would be good stewards to entertain anything of that nature. And so kick it around a little bit and come up with some ideas and present it to us and take a look at it.
I think there's nothing to lose in exploring the concept and seeing what level of interest there is. Like I said, ultimately, the council can say yea or nay to whatever, you know, is forthcoming.
There's another component that maybe would make it easier. You know, maybe it's not a corporate sponsorship that we're looking at. Maybe it's the in memory of somebody that wants that. They say, you have a bench, because my mother used to sit on that bench all the time, and now I would like to sponsor that bench.
Exactly.
And there's a little, very, small plaque, but it's not a corporate sponsor that we could potentially run into, like you're saying, Kyle, just last week. Maybe that's what we're looking at, bricks, benches, something like that, that's somebody, an individual remembering somebody. Or an individual who loves sports, has been a sports person, wants to sponsor. I could see something like that as an individual, maybe more than, because I'm hearing about the corporate sponsorship piece. And the other thing is, especially, even with Futures, who I think are, they've done a great job, because they did everything we asked them to do. But they could come back to us again for, some changes, and that may be part of an issue that we don't want to get into. So maybe it's not corporations, maybe it's more individual donors in some ways, so that we don't run into those pictures. But I think we ought to try to look at it and look at the various options that we would have.
What if a resident decided to put their name on something and gave us some money to do that, and then they wanted a variance on their zoning? Would that be considered a conflict of interest?
I didn't hear the last.
So a resident, donated money to name a building or a bench or a brick, and then all of a sudden, the next month, they came in and wanted a variance to something. Would that be considered an issue?
Well, clearly, first of all, you're always able to accept donations or reject donations if you feel that there's conditions attached to them that are not appropriate. If a donation is made, no, there has to be, clearly there's no quid pro quo. It is a donation, and, if there's a condition, I'd like this brick engraved in remembrance, or this bench, that's one thing you absolutely cannot
Sure.
let that influence any decision-making on a future request for the development application or anything. And even if we have to put it on the record at, you know, if they're so proximate in time, we're acknowledging that this donation occurred, and now we're here in this development application. It needs to be made very clear that one has nothing to do with the other.
Yeah, I mean.
And to the extent that there's documentation that it goes with the donation, I mean, I guess if you knew in advance that the development application was coming, you might even defer the donation until after the development application has been finalized. If you don't know about it, it's kind of hard to deal with it at the donation stage. You'd have to deal with it at the development or the application stage. But be very clear that there is no consideration being given because of the previous
I
donation.
know exactly where you're coming from.
I mean,
And I totally understand what you are saying as a big picture. I think at the end of the day, I wouldn't mind exploring as long as council has the discretion to approve or disapprove any of them that come forward. Let's say at the end of the day, we just don't want to go down that road and council decides not to. As long as we do have the choice to do that, I'd be open to exploring it, see what comes out of it.
And the exchange of value is the donation for the naming right. Beyond that, this, hopefully the council is smart enough, and the village attorney would make sure, as well as the manager, that there would be no other consideration, obviously, in exchange for that. That should be crystal clear to anyone coming in and participating in that process as well.
Sure.
Or even private use.
In there that talks about, in that particular situation, purchasing right, there's an agreement that would be reached when we brought it to council to be signed, and I'm sure knowing Keith, he can put some good legal verbiage to it to make sure that we're sound with that. So when you say explore, what does that mean for staff purposes for me? When you say that we're open to exploring it?
I'm against exploring it.
You're not open to exploring. Okay,
So I have a
one's not.
policy here that I've heard one comment that needs to be stricken with the deceased person. So we have a policy here that we put in place. What's my next move for
Well,
staff?
we don't have a consensus, because I think we may have 4 and 1. So I think it's
No,
going to.
just direction's okay. We can give
Okay,
direction
all right.
without a
You don't think we
consensus.
need a consensus at this point?
No,
All right.
you know, if it's something that 4 of 5 want to take a look at, we can
Okay.
certainly ask the manager to do that.
Okay.
And I'm not even sure what we'd be looking at this point, because we've been, you know, going from corporate to individual. But I would, if there are people out there that really have loved the village, that are interested in the village, that are really interested in the rec center, their kids grew up here, and they want to do something special and have, you know, some commemoration, I would certainly entertain something like that, because it could end up going just to the community center. You know, we could put parameters on it so that this, you know, whatever does happen, this is not just going into the general fund. This is something for the community center, for programming, for whatever. But it's, I mean, I heard what Bruce said, and I agree, you know, with what you said. And you said, Lori, you'd like to just explore it possibly, but not.
I think we need to be very careful, though.
Right, be very careful. All right. Kyle's not interested in that, right? That's okay. And
Less is
you are.
best.
Less is best, but
Keep it
I
small,
still think
keep
I'd
it
like to, like you said, bricks. There's a donation. There's, you know, we can
Yep.
still,
Less is best.
less is best.
Well, I think you, Jeremy, you mentioned a couple of things you could refine. I think maybe coming up with some, any additional criteria to ensure that whatever agreement, or whatever takes place, you've got some guidelines on that, to ensure that it's proper. And the other thing might be to explore, you know, again, not hard and fast dollar ranges, or not hard and fast dollar amounts, but maybe look at what some other communities have done, and are there some ranges in terms of donations that equate to a certain right, whether it's the gymnasium or the kids' activity room or whatever it might be.
You know, one thing you could consider doing, and you know, just noodling on the idea, Frank, is that, you know, you just have a plaque in there. And if people wanted to donate money, you know, donation to buy, if you want to donate specifically for the generator, for example, you know, Frankie DeBammer donated, you know, X amount of dollars towards the generator stuff. So, I mean, I've seen that quite a bit to where it was a great source of revenue, or donations and stuff for.
That's a good idea, because when you walk into hospitals oftentimes.
Sure, exactly.
That's what you see. So
Yeah.
that's another element I think that we could explore. I think that's
That's a
good.
private building.
Well, it's a private building, but.
This is a public building.
I understand.
That's where I'm coming from.
We already have a donation policy or a donation thing that we have now. So this is specific to naming, right? So we already have something if I want to come in and donate, $10,000 towards the generator.
Sure.
We could accept that through a process. Think at that level, depends on how much it is, if that's come to council to accept a donation of that size. So we already have that.
Mhm.
So that's not, to me, that's not part of what we're talking about
Okay.
tonight. But I do understand what you're talking about.
Anything else on this topic? Mary Ann, I didn't check. Did you have anybody that had come in with it? Yeah, I didn't think so. Brad? You still there?
Yes, I'm here. I don't
Wake up.
believe, there are a couple people, we'll have to open up the lines to see if they want to say anything.
All right, thank you. So let me know.
Everybody who is now unmuted may speak if you have something to say to council.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Is there anything you'd like to talk to us about? Very quiet. All right, Brad, thank you. I think we can close those lines. And if there isn't anything else, I will take.
Couple
Is there something?
things.
I'm
Yep.
sorry, didn't have it on the agenda.
Germany, you got an update on the dirt for the baseball fields?
I will
The
get
dirt?
one.
Okay.
I don't have one. I remember asking about it, but I have not received feedback, so I'll find out. I'll get
Dirt?
that to you by tomorrow.
Just making the dirt on the baseball season right now.
Oh, yes.
And just maintenance of those
Trying
fields.
to-
Some people have reached out to me,
Oh,
and I just wanted to make sure that that's being addressed.
okay,
We practice
all right,
I'll have you an answer in the morning.
all right. Anything else from anyone?
I just, have we gotten any feedback yet on the two grants that we applied for under Parks and Rec for the building? Well, I guess one's for the Constitution Park, the other's for the building, for the hardening of the buildings. I think it was, we applied for an $800,000 grant.
So that one has not closed yet, and
Okay.
I'll go back and look at that one, but I know that the deadline has not closed for that one.
Okay.
Regarding the building. We had two grants that were accepted, one for Remembrance Park and one for Tequesta Park.
So those have been approved?
$50,000.
Okay.
Pretty sure those have been approved.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Jeremy, how much did you say?
They're $50,000 each.
Oh, okay.
And we budgeted for those, the revenue versus expenditures. for
Okay.
those two grants. So I know, I have a complete spreadsheet done for you with all the
Okay.
updates that you'll get in your package on whatever today is, so next Thursday.
Okay.
I'll have that for you.
Outstanding, I appreciate that.
Yep, thank you. If there isn't anything else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you all.